You know what sorta sucks? Getting older. There is no greater change in a person's life that is more noticeable than growing up. Almost everything about you changes over time. Physically, of course, but even beyond that. Things like your interests and hobbies, personal tastes, and more. Then, there are the things beyond your control, like people in your life leaving, things or shows you grew up with ending, places you went to all the time as a kid being forgotten, torn down, or changed in some way. These are things you simply can't prevent, and they're the things that'll have you sitting up at night reminiscing, looking on your phone at an Instagram post of a playground or an old basement and feeling this odd sense of both peace and deep sadness at the same time. Nostalgia. A sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. That is what that feeling is when you don't know if you want to smile or cry when you remember that old friend you don't ever talk to anymore. It's easily one of the most confusing and bittersweet emotions you can feel, and I'd say there's no better way of quickly explaining how nostalgia feels than as bittersweet. This sort of bittersweet nostalgia is a widespread feeling that I've been noticing around my age group lately. I, a soon-to-be 23-year-old, fall in the early Gen Z category, which stems from people born between roughly 1997 to 2012, depending on who you ask. I know early 20s isn't exactly old by any means, but I, and quite literally millions of others, are now young adults struggling to figure out what exactly they want to do with their lives. Most of us are out of university now, trying to find jobs in our fields, figuring out what we want to do, how we're going to save enough money for a home or a family. Your 20s are a time of significant change, and honestly, it's kinda scary. Now more than ever, I see people turning to the past for a sense of comfort. Obviously, reminiscing isn't uniquely a 20s thing. In fact, you may be surprised here that the older you get, the more past you have to think about. What really sparked the idea for this video was the unique way in which I see my cohort choosing to look back on our pasts, specifically through the art of liminal space videos. Just want to say that if you find yourself enjoying the video, to please subscribe. We're getting close to 10,000, and I would really appreciate all the support. Thanks. Liminal spaces have been popular for a while now, gaining traction in 2019 and truly hitting their peak in around early 2022. In case you aren't quite sure what a liminal space is, here's a quick explanation. The term liminal space stems from the concept of liminality, or the idea of something being in a state of in-between, essentially being neither present nor absent. Memories specifically tie into this concept well, as your memories are real, but the places and the time they represent are gone. Liminal spaces are typically depicted as empty or abandoned places, more often than not giving off a sense of unease or eeriness. Liminal spaces first gained popularity through this image, one that I'm sure most people are well aware of. This infamous image of a musty, empty, and decrepit office building, dubbed the Backrooms, led to an enormous boom in liminal space art and discussion. With the image first being posted on 4chan on an earlier thread in 2018, it popped up again in 2019, being posted onto 4chan's paranormal theme board. Being fairly innocuous at first, the post was added to when an anonymous user replied to the image with the following: "If you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the back rooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you." In case you're unaware of the term no-clip, it stems from video games where in certain instances your character may glitch and fall through the floor and out of the game's map entirely. This one comment would take the internet by storm. The Backrooms themselves have become a massive internet community, with people creating more and more lore around the concept to this day. The Backrooms in general are mostly horror-oriented, which makes sense given the initial comment that gave the image and the idea life. But with the Backrooms taking off, liminal posts started popping up everywhere, whether they had anything to do with the Backrooms or not. Even then, non-backroom related posts typically had a horror element to them, often trying to trigger a feeling of familiarity with a location, only for it to be warped in some kind of way. Taking something familiar and putting a negative or creepy spin on it to evoke a reaction makes perfect sense, as more often than not, our nightmares are a somehow warped take on our own reality and lives. While the liminal, man, I have said that word so many times already, and it doesn't sound like a real word anymore. Liminal. Okay, I got it. While the liminal horror scene was thriving, certain people felt as though the images shown, more so than fear, evoked a feeling of loneliness, or in some cases, deep nostalgia. And again, given liminal spaces targeting familiarity, that makes sense. To these people, liminal spaces caused sadness, or, say it with me now, a bittersweet feeling within them. Liminal spaces started to blossom beyond primarily horror, and more simple, artistic, and calming liminal spaces started to be shown off more and more. It took a while for these kinds of images to take off, as people had to try different things to see what would stick. The actual analysis of liminal spaces and why they invoke the feelings they do became popular as time went on as well, leading to the understanding of the art form and psychology behind it all growing. The video in particular that comes to mind is Liminal Spaces, Exploring an Altered Reality by Solar Sands. This video, for a lot of people, was the first in-depth introduction to the art form, and I feel contributed quite heavily to the rise of general awareness of liminal spaces in the mainstream. As years passed and liminal spaces hit their absolute peak in 2022, the art of liminal spaces had truly grown beyond what anyone could have initially expected, reaching its most extreme in every category, with the original horror community still thriving, and now the more artistic and ethereal community booming as well. From this, a new, and what I think is currently the most popular form of liminal art emerged: liminal nostalgia. The type of liminal nostalgia posts you'll see will vary a little, but for the most part, almost all follow the same trends and format. The posts themselves are typically nothing more than a slideshow, essentially with various images of things or places that young adults will recognize from their childhood. It could be a photo of little kids playing with their Tamagotchis, a rainbow caused by a sprinkler on a warm summer day, or looking out the window on a stormy night. These are fairly abstract things, but for some reason, they strike a very deep chord for some people, myself included. The images themselves will similarly have a general design aesthetic, often being 4:3 to mimic the aspect ratio of an older television or digital camera display, as well as having a faint CRTV grain effect, or an old date displayed in the corner to further add the element of time having passed. While these pieces can be just images, almost all of the time they're accompanied with some kind of music as well, not dissimilar to other liminal space posts, which themselves incorporate some form of creepy music or audio in particular. In the case of liminal nostalgia posts, the audio is typically some kind of lo-fi, or sometimes just the sounds of nature, or both. I'm sure anyone even a little familiar with liminal nostalgia posts is familiar with these two pieces of music. All of these elements put together are what I think make up what is now referred to as nostalgiacore. The amazing thing about nostalgiacore posts is how similar yet varied they can be. Because so many people have shared experiences as children, it makes sense to target childhood things. But where the art form can get really interesting is when you take into effect how childhoods across the world can be so different. So while millions of Americans and Canadians will have very similar memories of growing up in the early 2000s, they will vary heavily from how someone from China or Lebanon grew up. I've seen nostalgiacore posts on Instagram before, specifically targeted toward Eastern European 20-year-olds, and almost all of what was shown was completely unfamiliar to me. The scenery, food, and activities all pretty much completely unknown. And while I may not have understood much of what I was seeing, the comments on these posts are full of people from across the world expressing their love and bittersweet memories that those images and sounds triggered within them. It really shows how such a simple art form can transcend borders and upbringing so easily and so palpably. It's so strange to think that much of the success and popularity nostalgiacore art and posts are receiving can in some sense be tied back to something as off-putting as the backrooms. And even beyond that, something as philosophical and strange as liminality. But the more you look at it and think about it, the more it makes sense. Liminality is all about transitioning and nostalgia, that warm feeling for a time that can never come back. Combining these two feelings and art forms to create nostalgiacore. I don't know how long the nostalgia core trend will stay, or if at some point, as Gen A eventually takes it over, it becomes unrecognizable to me. But I'm just glad that right now, I and tens of millions around the world just like me can enjoy it and reflect on our shared appreciation and love for the past and our childhoods together. Until next time, I'm Sir Surgeonor, and I really hope you enjoyed. Peace.